Hi, I'm Ali Words, and this is Last Unrifled Yaw. Last Unrifled Yaw is a podcast where we have conversations about video art, experimental music, avant garde literature, performance art, and the occult. If you or someone you know would like to be on Last Unrifled Yaw, please get in touch. Moyogash is a noise musician and video artist whose work engages with childhood trauma, temporal loops, and Santeria. We also talk about shrines as philosophical concepts and theoretical nonlinear video media. Hey everyone, I'm Ali Words, and this is Moyogash, also known as Gene. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Gene?
Yes, I'm a interdisciplinary artist from Philadelphia. I'm in an artist collective called Grizzly Grizzly, um, and I do sound, video, uh, printmaking, painting, kind of really everything. Obviously, experimental sound. So I kind of do a little bit of genre mashing, if you will.
That is cool. Yeah, I originally found you through your video art. Could you describe one of your recent episodes for us? Like, for someone who's never encountered it, what is it?
Yes. So like my most recent video art is kind of like a episodic, harsh noise cartoon that it has my illustrations and collage elements in it, and it's going through my in a way my childhood, but also dealing with my mixed raceness. Uh, and I'm combining these things together with my grandmother practiced Santeria. So I'm trying to reconnect with my culture, and those cartoons are kind of a mashup of who I am now, who I wasn't was, who I am not in a way. Kind of like there's a duality of how I was brought up and what I kind of wish I've learned in that time frame. So there's multiple different parallels with those cartoons. So that the main character is me, Jacko Moyo, and they kind of go through these situations.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I have to ask, have you heard of hypersigils?
Hypersigils? No. I would like to know more
Okay.
actually about that.
Yeah, they are. So there's this comic book writer who comes up a lot in chaos magic discussions, Grant Morrison, who wrote The Invisibles, which is a series of comics where the characters all symbolically, or I guess maybe not all of them, but a lot of the characters symbolically represent parts of Grant Morrison. And the protagonist is like a self insert intentionally. And over time, he
Okay.
realized through writing the story that he was manifesting things into his own life. A hyper sigil is like a sigil, so like a symbol that is used to manifest your intent or your will, but it exists through an additional dimension, traditionally time. So the hyper sigil is the narrative itself. But like a whole book can be a
Okay.
hyper sigil, or a film could be a hyper sigil. Um, and with how personal what you're doing sounds, um, it made me wonder if there was any relationship between the idea of hyper sigils.
See, I always like have sigils in the back of my mind. The main character Jacko Moyo, which is myself. I'm purposely collaging with family photos, so photos of me as a kid, and also since I am mixed, being Puerto Rican and being Irish, and my family actually denying that they're Irish, which goes into a different territory. So it's like a Halloween originated in Ireland, and in I'm from Philly, so there's like articles out there of like some people don't get like why are the Irish so into Halloween in Philadelphia. Um, and it's because it's some of the origins of Halloween is from Ireland. So like I was very drawn towards that, not even knowing some of these things, and that's why the main character has a pumpkin for a head, but it's still very it's like stained. It looks like stained glass. It also looks like it's very Latin American at the same time. This is like the how it's broken down with the multiple different colors. Uh, so sometimes in my work there's like multiple influences at the same time, which in a way is a sigil. That sounds really interesting, though. They kind of you're writing about a thing and then it actually happens.
Yeah, and for Grant
Um,
Morrison, when he was writing The Invisibles, um, he believes he manifested some sort of weird voodoo like scorpion entity that gave him a serious medical illness, and he was hospitalized until he wrote the part of the story where his self insert defeated it.
oh, that's very huh. Yeah, like I guess to kind of go from that, there's since I wasn't brought up around Santeria, and I was lucky enough to visit Puerto Rico and see my grandmother's shrine, which is a big influence of mine of going there and being around it and kind of having a moment in this space that's not mine, but it has like an ancestral meaning towards it. And so the more I look into that, it influences my work. I certain things just pop up, or I my work. The more I look into it, it has more in common with Santeria than I even knew. Even if it's like a universal meaning, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there are a few ways it makes sense, so I'm not sure exactly which ones you're talking about. But I'm curious, in what ways do you see Santeria? And could you give like a brief explanation of what Santeria is for people that maybe have just like heard it in a song once or twice? But how do you
Oh yeah.
see Santeria popping up in your work?
So Santeria is a Afro-Caribbean religion. It was brought over from the slave trade. From West Africa, the slave trade into the Caribbean. So Haiti, Cuba, where Santeria was born in, that was brought over to Puerto Rico. So it's like more of a it's interesting how religion goes. It's since it got brought over that way uh, and it got mixed with indigenous cultures. It's a little bit more of a in some ways it's a pure form of a African religion. Um, in the terms of the tradition stayed while in Africa it kind of grew. It definitely grew in the Caribbean, but in a different way. Um, and that this is a lot to kind of unpack. But how hopefully that's a good definition. But how it influenced me of like kind of seeing like a shrine from the Caribbean of some of these artifacts and certain colors and the meaning behind an object. It's very much an object based. In some ways, it's a very object based. Yeah, and it's being drawn towards that because of my grandmother. Kind of really solidified me of looking into that. And what I do has, like, I can't say that I don't practice Santeria. I'm just influenced by it as a lineage standpoint from my grandmother. But I can't say that like it's there's a fine line between Santeria and uh, magic. They're two separate things. So how I interpret it is like kind of like the conjuring. It's more of a conjure than Santeria itself. I just want to make that clear because since I'm not, it's a closed religion as well. You need to be initiated in. You need like a grandmother. Uh, Genetically, yes, I have a grandmother, but as a spiritual leader, a grandmother, someone, a teacher, which personally I don't have, but I'm doing the research. And if my path goes that way, then so be it. I'm just reconnecting until that point in my specific way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hmm. So, how do you? Could you tell us a little bit about your music? I've heard the harsh noise. Is all of your music harsh noise? Is that how you'd characterize
Um,
it?
yeah, harsh noise, power electronics. I did some like harsh noise wall for a while, but most recently it's been more stripped down, aggressive power electronics. I guess like my vocals would be, I guess, in a way considered more black metal, if you would like to call it that. If you see my live performances, um, there's like black metal vocals and there's like more shouting vocals. Yeah, that's how I can categorize it. Categorize my sound is power electronics and black metal.
So, what do you actually do to make power electronic music or noise?
Usually, like right now, I have a very basic 808. It's very drum driven, very loud drums with a background sound. If it's from a Casio keyboard, or just samples that I stretch out. So I'm always like plunder phonics, like taking samples um, and stretching them out, blowing them up, and just have a basic beat behind it. Recently, in the past, I would just like throw everything into the mix. But recently, I've been stripping it down a little bit more minimal. That when I play out live, my set is more minimal at this time. I just have a sampler. I have a vocal pedal and a microphone. That's really it right now. That's all I really need.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What drew you to making noise instead of, I don't know, something that people would actually call music? And just for reference, I love noise and noise music and music with noise influences.
Well, back in the day, like 10 or more years ago, I was actually in a deathcore band, ironically, and we would play out in Philly. And I guess that's my introduction to music. I guess, trained as a bass player. And I always tried to throw some weird things into the mix, being limited by deathcore. So I was always influenced by post metal. And I remember a side project of Cal Decapitation was was an ambient project, a dark ambient project. I believe I forget they were named after a date, and it's the lead singer from the Decapitation, and I guess that was my introduction to like experimental music. Um, was this this I guess side project from Travis. I think that's the vocalist name. And then there was a local band that was a metalcore band, and then they switched to being doom metal. And then to the point that they just became straight up noise, and then they lost their following. I wish I remembered this band's name, which was like very influential influence to me on MySpace. Um, that was my introduction to noise, and uh, I stopped playing music for like 10 years. And then I think in 2014, um, a coworker of mine who was into like post punk was like, "Oh, why don't you make music anymore?" And I was like, "Oh, like I'd rather be making stuff by myself." And like noise kind of popped back up, and the more I looked into it, I was like, "Oh, I've been trying to do this for a while," and kind of getting frustrated with like playing deathcore, and then just kind of stopped to go to art school. Really,
Yeah, that makes sense. Hmm. So, when you're designing your video pieces, what is your process like? What do you start from?
I usually start with each character. I draw everything out by hand. Surprisingly, everyone thinks I do everything on the computer or in MS Paint, but everything's on like bigger sheets of paper or something I can put in a book bag. Um, so I draw everything out and I do bold lines with a Sharpie, and then I take a photograph of the piece and I put it into Photoshop, and that's when I kind of um, start to clean it up and to color in the illustration, and then I make a GIF in Photoshop. So still in the Photoshop, but getting the points right and basic animation. Because when you look at my videos, they're moving, but nothing changes with them. They're constantly pulsating. Um, So it's just a very basic animation. And then after that, I export it as a GIF and put it into Premiere. And that's when I kind of start to do um, some different tools using some different effects.
Okay. Yeah. How do you how do you decide what a one of these episodes is going to talk about or do or be like?
That's when, I do a basic outline at first. I usually um, deter away from. So I have I write out scripts, and there's some subject matters. Either it's like from childhood. Recently, I'm talking about different things that happened in Puerto Rico, um, and I write these things out. And sometimes these videos, I end up not liking the dialogue, so I start mashing up different scripts together. I'm a big William Burroughs fan, and I'm a big fan of automatic writing and kind of the cut up method as a whole. And then I start to switching dialogues around, inserting characters that weren't there before, and sometimes that shows in the visuals of the video. Most the recent one, especially, it goes from two characters talking in a bedroom to a abstracted shrine that has dialogue, but you can't really hear a voice. Sometimes the characters don't talk. Sometimes the vocals don't match up with the more comic book looking word bubbles, and that's all by design. That's all by to kind of in a ways alienate the viewer, um, but hopefully wanting them to be like, oh, I need to watch more. Is the dialogue going to match up with the word bubbles? Is the word bubbles going to say something different than what the character is saying? What sounds are going to come out? Is there going to be in a way like a loud sound, or like maybe a jump scare, or is there going to a flag going to pop out of nowhere with some dialogue? Is there going to be glitches in there, which I do use VHS effects in my work by analog. That's not a digital. Um, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What kind of mood or effect are you trying to bring about in these videos?
Definitely like from childhood. So kind of like it goes into horror movies. It goes into like a VHS player, just popping in a tape and seeing things that you might be too young to see. Back in the day, we had a thing called like a hot box, where which you would get like the cables you aren't paying for, so you're stealing cable, and then you would see like the Spice channel, like the porn channel, and then that's all glitchy. That's all like you can't see what's happening. It's a loud sound. It's kind of pulverizing, and you're seeing like these images. You're like, what is that? Like what is going on? which in a way is like an influence of mine of like what do you see at a certain age, how does it affect your mind, and that's like sort of the effect that I want from the videos as well. Um,
That's really interesting.
yeah, that's where the
How do you think these videos might affect people's minds?
um, that's a good question. How the viewer feels. Usually, the viewer gets a sense of uncomfortable sensation that might come from the sound. If someone doesn't know or doesn't like noise, or they get like um, an eerie sensation, which an atonal sound. There's studies that there's certain frequencies that makes people kind of think they're seeing things. It's kind of sometimes called the ghost sound, um, which I'm kind of intrigued by. That's like one thing of kind of like speaking to the dead. Um, is the sound kind of making the back of the hair on the back of your neck kind of stand up? Are you uncomfortable with the dialogue? Are you uncomfortable with like the hand gestures like this like a kid character is making? Are you uncomfortable that that the characters in relation to another one that's smoking a cigarette? There's like certain things that you don't pick up on at first, but there is a lot of nuances in there. Um, but usually, just like some of the feedback I got and some of the places that I've shown this work at, they get an eerie sensation. They get it, and if they dig deeper, they're like, are these characters representing ancestral spirits? Are there deities around? Like, does it matter that they're kind of mashed up? They get that sort of sense in the visual language of a dual nature for these characters.
Yeah, definitely. It makes me think of a few different things. The first is that when I first encountered these recent episodes that we're talking about, it made me think of someone having an uncomfortably stimulating psychedelic experience where they took more than they perhaps should have, and they're just like locked in their room, maybe with a friend who's chain smoking cigarettes, and they're going down this uncomfortable, like childhood, not nostalgia, maybe reminiscence is a better word, while in this like state where they're fading in and out and they feel like they're in a time loop, especially because of like the GIF
Yes.
structure of it. And it's almost like there isn't any time, and you can hear everything that you could possibly hear picked out of the noise. And then
Yes,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
No, that's good.
I'm glad you picked up time. I'm glad you picked up time loop because the characters are stuck in a loop. They're constantly reliving these things, even though the dialogue is um, it's linear because since video is a linear media. But I purposely lock them in because of that. They're constantly chain smoking. They're constantly like pulsating. But they never pop. They're constantly in this state of almost like it's bliss, but it's also a curse at the same time.
Mm. Yeah, so that makes me think of your themes of childhood and especially intergenerational trauma, where we have these repeating patterns that maybe change slightly every time, but you're still stuck in them. Which leads me to a question, which is how would your, if you could use non-linear video media without like having to do a ton of work, what would that look like? And then maybe how would that relate to non-linearly living our lives? How does that relate to trauma? I don't know. That's a lot of stuff, but you can respond to whatever
No, that's
parts.
great. I love that question. There's some non-linear stuff. If you dig a little bit deeper, it's a little bit more abstracted. Um, and everything kind of still morphs, but there is no dialogue in a way. It's still characters. Something I kind of want to go back to is like a little bit more nonlinear. Um, but still telling a story, and still make these episodes as well.
Oh, I mean like technologically nonlinear.
Technical. Oh yes.
So like you have a whole field of video, and it could be in a VR headset, and you can turn, or maybe there's some other mechanism by which you're not just like forced through the same thing. Like it's a whole cloud of these looping, intersecting time loops.
See, I do enjoy that. I think that's a part of me. It's like when the cut up method comes in for me personally, of like cutting up film. Um, and you see the end in the beginning or like in the middle, and you see these repeated patterns, um, in a way. But physically, I haven't had, at least I haven't had a chance in a way to explore that,
Yeah, I haven't encountered
or
it. It just occurred to me while thinking
yeah.
about linearity and time loops, and it was more of like a spitball idea to see if you had anything that like stuck to that. And if you don't, that's okay. But I'm imagining a
No,
future
that's a
technology
good.
that doesn't exist that lets us do almost, I guess video games are nonlinear video, sort of.
Yeah, it's starting to. There's still a beginning and an end. Um, but yeah, most recent like of open world games, that's starting to be more of like the normal, or pick your own path. That's almost like reading like a yeah, like reading a pick your own adventure book, and you like turn the page like 34, and then you get like the bad ending or you die right there. That's like yeah, that's like real. I'm really intrigued by that, in a way. And I was going to, I was making a, what are they called again? Like the visual novel games I was putting my characters in, but never finished because this takes so much. It's so much of a learning curve. But I guess like I tried that is like in a video, like try to like you can pick your own adventure, but it's still linear. Like,
Yeah,
um,
I do think that your work process, the kinds of things that you're producing, lend themselves well to some sort of 2D video game. Have you ever played like one of
I'm a
those
big fan.
like really old school dungeon crawler games where like you press the forward button, your character moves forward like one step, and everything's like flat in 2D?
Um,
I feel like this.
Not so like I played Earthbound. That's a big influencer, like a big influence on me was playing Earthbound as a kid, um, and I guess like I couldn't read for the longest time, and I guess like kind of like childhood stuff. Like I didn't talk for a while. I had a hard time reading. I had to go in specialty classes coming up in school. So I would, in a way, like I couldn't get past the first part of Earthbound, and every time I would turn it on, I would. I don't know if you ever played Earthbound, but like I couldn't get past the first Starman, but I would always like play the first part. And so, until like later on in life, I was like, all right, like let's try this, and finally got past that part. But in a way, that's a loop as well,
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, that
which I
definitely
haven't thought about
sounds
until
like
right now.
that kind of sounds like the videos that we were just talking about where you have this loop that you're stuck in and you have that childhood theme coming up again, and then at some point maybe you just pop out of it.
Yeah, which is I haven't thought about until now. That's like something I need to put in the back of my mind for new work. So, uh, I'm a big fan of RPGs, Final Fantasy, um, Earthbound, any RPG. I just like really enjoy. I
Have you
remember like
seen any of the like really surrealist JRPGs that people have made, like Hylics?
I know about Hilux, and I think is that the one of the moon because my students are like my former students from last semester are obsessed with the one with like the moon
It's
character.
like
I think it might
claymation
be
and it's like a
Hilux.
yellow crescent head. Yeah,
Yes, yes, my students are obsessed with that game. I personally didn't play it. There's a game that I found on, I believe, Steam. It's called
I
Middens,
love that
and
one. Yeah.
it's oh yeah, you know about it. I don't know anyone who played that. Middens is great.
And then there's a Gingiva where it's like,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah. I played a little bit of Gingiva, but Middens is such a great experience of this like the collage element, and then you get to kill every character, but you can shoot yourself in the foot if you kill everyone, and then you don't have any save points. I love that concept, um, and just like the so much work that got put into that game. Um, yeah, I one of my favorite RPGs that came out within like I guess like the 10 years, right? That's not 10 years old yet.
yeah. It might be. I don't know. I feel like I first encountered that artist on DeviantArt.
Mm.
Hmm. Weird. It's,
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad to meet someone that actually played that game.
while we're at it, there's another game that is in those. I guess it's closer to Hilux. It's called Brutal Orchestra, and it's sort of like
Okay.
claymation-y Hieronymus Bosch roguelike
Oh,
turn-based
nice.
combat. Um, it's yeah, the combat's closer to like a JRPG, but it's like a repeating loop again where you go through and you die and you go through and you die, and maybe eventually you pop out of it at the end.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like some of these games does have an esoteric feel to them um, that I'm drawn towards, and even just like who knows what the creators of that game, if that was intentional or not, either like nonlinear or this like using collage and um, different resources. I guess you do get that sort of feeling because in a way you're dealing with different timelines. At least to me, when I collage, um, or when you're influenced by different aspects, even if it's like indigenous Taino culture, which is the which are Puerto Ricans or most Puerto Ricans, um, or and dealing with past culture and now culture. That's like a collage of like it's a magazine that was printed at a certain time frame with certain things in them that you're sourcing from, and then when you collage them with different elements, like which element is from where and when, and is the thing that you're making or the end product. Um, is it yours? Is it the culture that you're taking it from, or is it just like a composite of all those things?
Hmm. Yeah, now that brings me back to a question I wrote down maybe like 10 minutes ago, which is I would like to hear you talk a little bit about shrines. But to contextualize, I've been thinking a lot about altars lately, both in terms of them being as a collage, but not like literally just an altar on your shelf, but like the films of Kenneth Anger and Matthew Barney, or the way some
Nice.
religious groups or maybe cultural groups do kind of like ritualistic dance theater. Like there's a fair amount of that in Bali that I'm thinking of. Um, Sorry, that was a lot of stuff, so I'm starting to lose
Yeah.
my tangent. But
No, it's great.
um,
No, I love that. Well,
what do you think about
Matthew
with
Barney.
shrines? Oh, and I wanted to tie it into video art, which is why I started with Kenneth Anger, because like these video art things are kind
Okay.
of like a succession of altars or shrines or like ritual rooms in a temple. Um, so what do you mean by shrine? Like not just like literally in this one cultural context, but what is the general context concept of a shrine?
Well, how I view shrine is might be different to others. I guess my first interaction with a shrine is in the streets of Philly. I've been here all my life, and then when someone gets killed on end of your block or in certain neighborhoods, like especially um, in Latin culture, they they literally like they build a basic wooden structure. You have the picture of the deceased. You have candles. You have flowers, teddy bears, and balloons, and that's like my first interaction with that. And then this like culturally goes back to my grandmother, and really, I also culturally Philly. I know that like or this urban life in general, and usually a shrine is like remembering a loved one or someone from the neighborhood, um, and I guess that's like the context of like that's for me that's a shrine. Um, and I had I don't know Kenneth Anger, so I wrote that name down. It's off tangent. And Matthew Barney, I can kind of see that. I love the Cremaster cycle and Matthew Barney, and the kind of the themes are going to that. And I guess some of those objects, that the remnants of these videos or from these performances are kind of displayed in a gallery, in in an artifact sense, which is like I think the artifact of a past action, artifact of a past person, or a past event. Um, in a way, this like thinking about it now, I feel like shrines are they're the past, but also very much now when you have one. And hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of different fields and ideas that we're all like mashing together into one. Itself a kind of collage. But yeah,
Yeah.
Kenneth Anger made a lot of short films in, I think maybe they start in the early 50s. And some of them, especially, there's one that is, especially on the topic of a procession of altars or shrines. We have Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, which is, it's thelemic. So all of the protagonists, none of whom speak, are different thelemic figures. Like there's a person who's the great beast that has like makeup and like giant eyebrows and giant fingernails that are like claws. And you have all these different figures from Crowley's corpus that are presented moving through. I think he just had a friend with a very expensive house in California. And if you listen to
Nice.
the director commentary, a lot of it, he explains some of the symbolism and what the characters are doing and like what rituals they're referencing through their actions and postures. But also just a lot of these random objects that friends of his had that were expensive or unique in various ways. So yeah, kind of like structurally, maybe not structurally, conceptually, in the terms of the way that it's conceived, there are similarities to Matthew Barney's Cremaster cycle. And then Matthew Barney's Cremaster cycle, of course, has a lot of Masonic themes and itself is kind of a ritual.
Yes. Yes, definitely. My favorite part of the Cremaster cycle when they have Murphy's Law and a Gnostic Front playing in the Guggenheim, and Matthew Barney's just climbing up the Guggenheim, and you have like the hardcore dance. Well, they're not hardcore dancing; they're just like moshing, and it's like they're both playing at once, which I love because it's like first it's absurd, but to go deeper, it's two sounds going at once. I that idea of like two hardcore bands just mashes together. That's like in a way it starts to become like a noise performance, and then just having someone like Matthew Barney paint it pink with like a more of like a Masonic and also some ways Celtic um, garb on in that mix it's almost disorienting. It's for the viewer. Because the people that are watching that video is because they're not like, you can like pirate that the Cremaster cycle, but it's really intended for like a audience who can like pay to see these films and or like live in a certain California or New York, and it's not for the general public, which that's a different subject. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. But
Yeah, it is. It's kind of weird how even just pretending that there's some sort of artificial scarcity for these things changes the way the audience interacts with them. Because I've never actually had the no, I have seen a little bit of some art films, but except in like one circumstance, I've never had the opportunity to see an art film in an art gallery.
hmm.
Um, and I'm just imagining uh, that really gives a different context to it than watching it on your phone or in an IMAX
Totally.
theater or on a TV that you have in your bedroom.
Usually, like, like I guess because I'm a curator also, um, and the accessibility is like one thing I really I want to strive for. Um, I'm lucky enough to kind of be around that and be around some of these experimental galleries that do host local artists that that we can see certain videos of. And yeah, it's totally different. But I guess on my point, it's like I guess some of my colleagues I went to art school with. They're like, oh, it has to be in the gallery. Like, I don't want to see anything on my phone. I don't want to see anything on the TV. And I was like, that's like who goes to a gallery? Like, there's a certain type of individual that goes to a gallery. Um, but having it on your phone, that's so much more accessible to like anyone with a phone that can have internet access can watch this thing. And I always like strive for with my students to be like, hey, just make sure you make like think about who sees this video and like how do you grow an audience, and don't put a paywall behind. Well, this is a personal thing. Like all of my music's free, all of my videos are free. You can watch it all. You can download it all for free. Um, like I'm lucky enough to teach, and that's how I make money. But just to not have that block, because you block so many people out. And I think for me as an artist, as an experimental artist, I really need to stress that like it should be on multiple platforms, and it should be at least accessible, even if someone watches a second of it and you're like, oh, I don't want to watch any of it. Like, this is too much. Or I don't get this, or it's too alienating, or it's too loud. As long as it's out there in the world that people can watch, that's like, I just wanted to stress that.
Yeah, I'm always so disappointed when I realize that I can't even pay to see. Like, I'll do some research and I'll find someone that makes some really cool video art, and I'll find like interviews with them or like clips of it on YouTube. And there's not even a way to like buy a $50 DVD or a $10 rental on Vimeo or something. It's just impossible for anyone
Yeah.
that can't fly to wherever it's showing.
Yeah, my biggest influence is it's not the Beatle Paul McCartney, it's Paul McCarthy, the performance artist, uh, who I completely love. I love installations. He does sound stuff. I found out that he does noise as well, which he doesn't really show. You have to really dig deep. You can't really find his stuff. You might be able to find Painter or like the one called Burgers. You can find some of those on YouTube, or there's like a website for video art that it's all pirated. It's called Ubu Web, I believe. It's called
Is that all pirated?
UBU.
I thought a lot of it was public domain.
Oh, public domain, but it's made to the artist who. Not a lot of people know that the artist or poet really who put that website up is called Kenneth Goldsmith, and his whole thing is appropriation. So his poems are like literally like he'll just listen to the radio and transcribe what like the weather is saying, and his poems literally just what the announcer or whoever or the weather person is saying, um, and then dealing with like appropriation in that way. So it's like it's made from that person. So it could be public domain, but I know like a lot of his work is just like as a poet, a conceptual poet, is very mundane.
Sounds like a ready-made.
Yes, it's exactly it's a ready-made.
All right, that's cool. Do you have other inspirations you'd like to share with us?
So art-wise, definitely Paul McCarthy, Anselm Kiefer, um, uh, Jason Rhodes, who was Paul McCarthy's student, who makes these amazing installations. Sound wise, Purient, Puce Mary.
I'm sorry, you broke up for just a
Farm.
second there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So sound wise, we have
Purient, Puce Mary, Pharmacon. Let's think. Well, obviously Merzbow. There's Kofer, Calfer. I can't pronounce the name so much. Big influence right now, Calfer. And then there's some of like my buddies out there, Cemetery Bastard, who I play with, who I'm playing with next weekend in New York. Earthworm Von Doom. These are just like local noise artists or like noise bands. Arita, Piss Shitter is also really good. I guess like my main influences are like some of my friends who I get to know, but Puce Mary and Purient and Merzbow, kind of like a heavy hitters. White House, obviously, for power electronics, is an influence. And then Throbbing Gristle and Genesis P. Orange, just from the sound lineage, they're the people that I gravitate towards. But growing up, I was just like a deathcore kid, new metal, kind of early 90s, 2000 type of person.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's a good list, and I'll message you later to get the spelling on some of those. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, that's a question for you. That's a you found me through Moyogash, and I'm always interested of like how people find me. I guess just recently on Reddit, some people found me through an Instagram song that I put up, and you're like, "What's this weird song?" So I'm always interested in that, and I guess like if I guess for a question for you, what do you think? What do you think Moyogash is about?
That's such a tricky question.
I know.
So there's the death of the author, of course. So anything I say is both true and irrelevant. But
okay.
What is it about? To me, if I hadn't spoken to you, I would have thought that it was a form of catharsis to deal with unpleasant things that you experienced in your childhood, and then the lack of your surrounding cultures to actually help with it in any meaningful way.
That is part of it. Yes. Yeah, it's funny with the Moyogash project. It's funny that I'm calling it a project because it's very much me, and very much like the installations I put up and the visual aspect is under Moyogash because I can't separate myself from the art. I know some people do, but that's just me. That's just like wholeheartedly. The sound is me. The visual aspect is me. Um, and it is like this very personal, even with if I'm dealing with cartoons. So I'm glad that some of these bigger themes get picked up along the way from the viewer. Um, so thank you for that answer. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. They're very interesting. I guess you're calling them cartoons. I wish more people made these kinds of things. And then another issue, which is kind of why I made the show, is it's hard to find that sort of content. I feel like there's more out there that I'm just not encountering.
Yeah, it all really it depends. Depends where you look. Like
Is there a
I
place
guess
people
in
post
video
this sort of stuff?
there like I'm not too sure. Like I don't really like for video art wise in like kind of the art scene in Philly. I don't really see too much stuff for like what I do. Because everyone kind of likes to keep things separated. Ironically, um, so like the harsh noise kids don't fuck with the art kids,
Hmm.
uh, and I'm somewhere in between in a way. Like I went to art school and everything, but when I first started doing noise, no one knew I went to art school. Um, but like the stereotypical art kid makes more experimental work, and then the harsh noise power electronic kids are like the kids that like I guess the stereotype couldn't get into art school in a way. So like I'm like both at the same times, which kind of relates to the work anyway. Um,
Yeah, there's a
if
lot
that
of
makes
in
sense.
betweenness.
Yes, yes, yeah. Usually there's not. Yeah, there's some. Jordan Deal is an artist who I really enjoy from Philly. That's actually incorporating noise and visuals together. Um,
All right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
a
answer is that there isn't like one place to find. Like it would be nice
you
if there
really
was
have.
some sort of like website or subreddit or YouTube channel where you would find like middens and gingiva and the stuff that you're doing and a lot of these other people that you've mentioned or like some of those video games we've talked about. Uh, yeah, and I can't find it, which is why this show exists.
Well, I'm yeah. This is why these things are very important, and like I really appreciate you taking the time to actually talk about some of these things or bring these things to light or having a platform for experimental artists and musicians and occultists to kind of have a place as a catch-all, but also just have a platform. So yeah, I really appreciate what you do.
For sure, yeah, and it's a lot of fun. Do you have any last questions or anything else you'd like to bring up?
Um, Not so much. I just got a shout out to the Kitsch Magic Collective with Cemetery Bastard, with Garrett, Hunter, Matt, Damien, a little collective we have, and also like the art collective. I'm part of Grizzly Grizzly. Shout out to all of y'all and giving me a platform to put together experimental artists, and I guess I really stress um, uh, any of the artists that are out there to check out Grizzly Grizzly because we're putting up experimental installations. We're trying to put video art together, and we're trying to put like online shows as well for accessibility. So yeah, look us up. Look up the Kitsch Magic Collective, which is like also part of my Instagram, and look up Grizzly Grizzly as well.
Yeah, and we'll have links to everything down in the description as always. And then my last question, you sort of already did it, but is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Um, I guess I'm going to plug myself. I guess my Instagram handle is Moyogash _ Kitsch Magic. You can find out all the different stuff I post there very regularly, and you can find me. I play in New York next week with Cemetery Bastard, and then the next show after that is in October in Philly at Century, where I used to book plenty of noise shows in Philadelphia, and I guess like use me as a resource if you have any questions at all. If you like, you're trying to figure some stuff out, I'm very welcome into. If you have a question, I will answer. I will. I usually try to answer people who message me. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's great having you on Last Unrifled Yaw.
Thank you.